formally sign a deal to end the war and reopen the Strait of Hormuz, but there's still questions about the details of the deal and what comes next. I'm Matthew Petty, and coming up on Florida Matters Live and Local, are you hopeful about this peace deal? Happy to see gas prices trending down. You can join the conversation at 813-755-6562 or email floridamatters@wusf.org. Also this hour, Father's Day is a celebration for lots of families, but like other holidays, it can also be a time of grief for some. We'll talk about navigating loss during Father's Day and other holidays. Plus, World Sickle Cell Day is coming up. Hear why this lifelong condition can sometimes be fatal and what it means for young people with a diagnosis. Also talk about the innovations in treatment. And meet a guy who's keeping the spirit of Beatlemania alive in Tampa Bay. That's all coming up after the news.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. President Trump is currently holding a news conference as the G7 summit in France comes to a close and he heads back to Washington, D.C. At the gathering, uncertainties loomed over what's in the Memorandum of Understanding the U.S. announced with Iran for ending their conflict. As NPR's Frank Ordonez reports, Trump has said the text is not yet final and leaves open the possibility that the U.S. could go back to bombing Iran.
In a meeting with the Egyptian president, Trump said the agreement that's been signed with Iran doesn't prevent the U.S. from taking action if he feels it's necessary.
It's a memorandum of understanding, and if I don't like it, we'll go back to shooting at them, dropping bombs on their head.
When do you expect the wording?
If I don't like it, if they don't behave, we'll go right back to dropping bombs right smack in the middle of their head.
And Trump insisted that the agreement does not include any immediate sanctions relief. Franco Ordonez, NPR News, Evian, France.
Iran's Revolutionary Guard is warning of a harsh response if Israel does not halt its attacks in Lebanon. Israel continues to strike the Iran-backed militant Hezbollah despite the tentative deal reached between the U.S. and Iran. Here's NPR's Aya Batrawi.
Iran's Revolutionary Guard says Israel's violated the ceasefire in southern Lebanon 84 times in the past 2 days. And it warned in a statement Israel should expect a, quote, harsh response if it does not end its war against Hezbollah. Iran says the agreement with the U.S., set to be signed Friday, states attacks on Lebanon will be halted. Iran also says it views any continued Israeli occupation of Lebanon as a violation of this initial agreement. Israel says its forces will remain in southern Lebanon for as long as necessary. Hezbollah's attacks at Israel have killed 23 soldiers and 2 civilians. Lebanese authorities say Israel's attacks have killed more than 3,800 people, hundreds of them women and children, and displaced more than 1 million. Aya Batrawi, NPR News, Cairo.
The Republican chair of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, Tom Cotton, says Jay Clayton's confirmation hearing for Director of National Intelligence is still on, even though President Trump called for a delay. While at the G7, Trump took to social media early this morning Eastern Time to announce the Senate hold off on Clayton until it confirmed the DNI nominee's replacement, a Trump personal lawyer, as U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York. Well, President Trump tapped Clayton after his pick for acting DNI, housing official Bill Pulte, faced a bipartisan revolt in Congress where lawmakers allowed FISA, a key intelligence gathering tool, to expire last week. President Trump said today he would not support FISA's authorization without a strict voting identification bill that currently lacks enough votes to pass Congress. U.S. stocks are mixed this hour. The Dow is up 267 points. This is NPR News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include United States Postal Service, dedicated to putting reliability at the core of USPS Ground Advantage to help businesses operate smoothly. More at usps.com/Ground Advantage.
You're listening to WUSF 89.7. I'm Craig Kopp. Safety Harbor City Commissioners voted to change locations for its annual Independence Day fireworks show again. WUSF's Maria Avlanides tells us why it's ending up back at its original home.
City officials previously voted to move the fireworks to Safety Harbor City Park. Reason being, the usual location of Waterfront Park is still having 2024 hurricane damage repaired. But Mayor Joe Ayoub says when residents voiced concerns about the impact the show would have on birds nesting at the new site, the city listened.
We care about the wildlife in the area. We want to be good stewards, of our natural parks and wildlife.
Commissioners voted Monday to bring the display back to Waterfront Park. And while there won't be a stage for live entertainment like in years past, AYUP says the fireworks won't be scaled back.
People still get a great show for the country's 250th birthday.
The fireworks are scheduled to start at 9 p.m. on the 4th. Maria Vlonitis, WUSF 89.7 News.
Attorneys for the Tampa Sports Authority say there is no conflict of interest from a recent vote by its board members. Local attorney Jared Willis asked 4 of them to resign after they voted to send a letter to Hillsborough County Commissioners. That letter said they would recommend paying to renovate Raymond James Stadium over paying for a new ballpark for the Tampa Bay Rays. Willis says they should have disclosed they own properties in Ybor City that could be affected by building a new stadium, even if Ybor is not under consideration.
The fact that things weren't disclosed that should have been disclosed, to me, it's wrong.
The county's attorney will advise commissioners that they do not have the power to fire the Sports Authority's board members. A key platform Cubans in the U.S. use to send money and goods to relatives in Cuba has stopped operations. The Trump administration trying to choke off international support. A lot of vulnerable Cubans rely on help from family in Florida, especially in Miami. I'm Craig Kopp, WUSF 89.7 News.
WUSF reporters show up when a vote is taken or when a business closes. These are reporters who live, shop, and work here, same as you.
Every day, something happens in this community that matters. A road project gets funded. A new art exhibit opens up. You rely on WUSF reporters because they live here.
WUSF News is common ground. It's what's happening in your neighborhood and your sports club. It's a kind of infrastructure, and you notice it most when it's gone. WUSF is your spot for local.
This is Florida Matters Live and Local, broadcasting from the Doctors Lorraine Rubis and Neil Frankel studio at WUSF in Tampa. I'm Matthew Petty. Well, tomorrow the US and Iran are set to formally sign a deal to end the war launched by the United States and Israel back in February and reopen the Strait of Hormuz. President Trump told reporters he feels America will secure the upper hand in negotiations.
This agreement covers something very nicely. We're not paying for anything. We're not doing anything. The markets now are higher than they were when we started. Remember that. The stock market now is 2,500, maybe even more than that, points higher than it was when we said. It's pretty amazing.
Well, news of a peace deal, albeit a preliminary one, already having an impact on stocks and oil prices. But what are the details and just how secure is this deal? To talk more about this, we're joined by Arman Mahmoudian. He's a research fellow with the USF Global and National Security Institute. Arman, thank you for coming back on Florida Matters Live and Local.
Thank you for inviting me, Matthew.
And you are welcome to weigh in as well. Are you relieved there's an end in sight to this months-long conflict? Happy to see gas prices ticking down, perhaps. Or maybe you're skeptical about a lasting peace. The number, 813-755-6562. That's 813-755-6562 to join the conversation. You can also weigh in by sending us an email, floridamatters@wusf.org. Well, Arman, President Trump sounds pretty confident about this peace deal, but what do we actually know about the details?
Well, honestly, we don't know much, especially, earlier on Bloomberg and Wall Street Journal, they published the 14 articles of the Memorandum of Understanding. But now the White House says that memorandum is not necessarily the real one, and it's not really in accordance to what they have signed it. But what also we know is that Vice President J.D. Vance hours ago announced that yesterday they signed the deal, and they even are discussing to signing it digitally maybe today. And they met on Friday for the advanced talks. Mm-hmm. But here are what we know for sure and what is going to come out of this memorandum of understanding based on the official statements from both parties. This is not the end of the negotiations. This is not also the end of the political settlements. This concludes the war for now. The war can be resumed future afterwards in a month, in a year. What do we know? That this memorandum of understanding is set to serve as the framework and the platform for both parties to actually reach an agreement, a diplomatic treaty, within the next 60 days over the most consequential matter between Iran and the United States, which is Iran's nuclear program. Mm-hmm. For now, what happens is that we will go back to the status quo prior to the February 28th, which war began, which means that Iranians are going to open the Strait of the Hormuz. Americans are going to lift the blockade of the Iran, and the Iran's highly enriched uranium, the 480 kilogram of the uranium, probably would be diluted inside the Iran, but the rest of the Iranian nuclear facility, based on the official status quo, will remain as the status quo prior to the wartime.
So, one of the things that was mentioned in the kind of 14 points that you referred to, Arman, was there's some sanctions that have been in place. There's frozen Iranian assets, quite a lot of money there. I mean, albeit there's some slightly confusing information coming out of the White House, but that's going to be part of this deal, right? So those assets will be unfrozen bit by bit, sanctions lifted. Is that your understanding of it?
Well, that was at least what the Iranian claimed. They claimed that the sanctions would be lifted. Some of the media outlets also in the United States indicated that right after the signing of the memorandum, Iran can resume the selling the petrol, oil, and gas without any limits, which brings Iran actually back to its state in 2017. However, the U.S. officials, including the President Trump's statements that been made earlier on today, indicates that there would not be any sanction relief or immediate sanction relief. We need to wait and figure it out how it's going to be implemented. What we do know that Iranians are very keen on two main economic concessions. The first is the matter of Iran's frozen assets, which is something between $20 to $30 billion abroad. They are in the foreign countries. And the second is the sanctions on Iran's oil and gas.
Sorry, just back to the assets. Did you say between 20 and 30 billion?
20 to $30 billion outside of the country, yes.
Okay.
And then the second issue is that the Iranian oil and gas, Iran wants to be able to sell its oil and gas without any limits. Oil and gas were historically the main source of revenue for the country, so they are very much keen to get back to that. On the revenue part, there have been some discussions. Some discussion indicated that the both parties reached an understanding that half of the Iranian frozen assets would be resumed or would be available to Iranian now, and the other half would be after reaching a deal. There are other also reports that assets that have been frozen outside of the country would be transferred into the bank accounts into the Qatar, and Iran can use that assets and that funding only for the civilian and humanitarian purposes. Basically can buy medicines, foods, and stuff like that, but nothing that can assist or enable Iran to recover its military after the war. We still cannot be really certain about it. We have to wait until the United States actually discloses the text and the context of the memorandum of understanding. Regarding oil and gas, that's a really interesting part. That's going to be very tricky. If the United States has agreed to allow Iran to sell its oil and gas without any limits, this is a great concession from the American parts. This is actually a major advantage for Iran. Iran has the largest combined gas and oil reserve on the face of Earth. If you combine both of the resources to each other, being able to sell that without any revenue would bring a great deal of revenue to a country. Specifically speaking, now that the price of gas and oil is high, Iran can generate a great deal of revenue. Although Iranian would have a problem to find a market, because I think market still would look at the Iran as not necessarily the most reliable supplier.
Yeah.
Because again, the chances of war being resumed in a couple months is still there. It's not insignificant. It is still there. So I think market will be patient and to figure things out further.
If you're just joining us, we're talking with USF Global and National Security Institute research fellow Arman Mahmoudi about the tentative peace deal between Iran and the United States. What are your hopes for a lasting peace between the two countries? You can join the conversation and weigh in by calling 813-755-6562 or emailing FloridaMatters@WUSF.org. I'm wondering what you're hearing from people in Iran, Arman, about this. Are they optimistic?
They are optimistic. They also have their own concern. They are optimistic because they are feeling that they are leaving the no war, no peace era. For the last 3 months, the Iranian, and actually last almost a year since the first war between Iran and Israel in June of 2025, Iranian people been thinking and feeling that they are living in an atmosphere that there is no war, there is no peace, they couldn't plan their life, they were not certain about the safety of themselves, the beloved ones. So this is kind of obviously relief for them. They know that the war more likely would be over at this point.
Yeah.
But they also have concerns, the political concerns, because a great deal of the Iranian population, they hold and bear a notable resentment toward the regime.
Yeah.
And
Well,
what happened? Yes, go.
I was just going to say, I mean, you can kind of see that playing out with the World Cup right now. I mean, that's sort of overshadowed some of those, well, at least one of those games. Iranians in Los Angeles were protesting the Iranian regime around Iran's match with New Zealand on Monday night. They booed the national anthem, but they're also cheering the team when they scored. So that kind of tells you a little bit, I think, about that complicated relationship between expat Iranians and their country, right?
Yes, it is exactly. I mean, that's a great example of what happened during the Iran-New Zealand game. And I think now this war and this deal is going to make it complicated too. Because look, despite the fact that today the American leadership are making an argument that the goal of the war never was the regime change, the fact is that in the earlier days of the war, the rhetoric that President Trump had and Prime Minister Netanyahu that this is gonna result in the regime change. President Trump made a public statement. He told the Iranian people, "You're going to have a chance that you never had to fulfill your destiny, to take over of your destiny." The regime didn't collapse. The regime didn't collapse despite being bombed by one of the two very strong countries, one of them being the superpower United States. The regime didn't collapse despite the fact that the entire first echelon of the military and political high command was removed at the first day of the war. Actually, the regime resisted it. Regime continued its military campaign with the organization and discipline, with whatever capacity was available to them. And that sends a signal to Iranian people inside and outside that if the US and Israel couldn't remove this entity, so what chances that we have? Can we remove them by ourselves? And that brings a kind of a sense of hopelessness to the country. They now feel that this is the bitter reality that they need to deal with it. And they may not have much of a choice but to just put up with it, tolerate it for the certain future.
Yeah, and just to kind of close things out here, I mean, it sounds from what you were saying, and again, some big questions remaining over the terms of this deal, but if those concessions are lifted, if they are, as you say, eventually able to sell more oil and gas and, retain some of those frozen assets, that's money that's going towards the regime in some ways, so could make them stronger.
Yes, exactly. It could make us stronger. And, to be honest, from what we have seen in past, specifically speaking after JCPOA, the such sanction reliefs is going to empower the regime, but it doesn't necessarily change the economic atmosphere for the people in a short term. In a medium term and long term, it may. We haven't seen it in the JCPOA because JCPOA didn't get the chance. President Trump left it. But it would empower the regime. It would also available regime to not only sustain itself, but also to buy out loyalties. Authoritarian regimes have a tendency of offering a stipends, offering a scholarship to just, buy out and expand their base. And I think it's going to happen in Iran too.
We've been speaking with Aman Mahmoodian, Research Fellow with the USF Global and National Security Institute. Thank you so much for your insights.
Thank you for inviting me, Matthew.
Well, coming up next, Father's Day is a celebration for lots of families, but like other holidays, can also be a time of grief for some. We'll talk about navigating loss during Father's Day and other holidays. That's when Florida Matters Live and Local continues. Stay with us.
Hurricane season is here. It's time to replenish your kit for any event. Get a storm supply checklist, safety plan, and comprehensive guide at WUSF.org. And stay tuned on air and online for dependable weather information. WUSF, ready to serve.
Support for WUSF comes from listeners like you and from Trenum Law, with attorneys who value relationships with their clients, striving to be not just attorneys, but reliable partners and trusted advisors. Learn more about Trenum Law at TRENAM.com.
You count on WUSF for trusted news and thoughtful conversations across our community and the state of Florida. This service will only continue when listeners choose to support it. Never given before? Join the movement and become a WUSF member today. Visit WUSF.org.
Welcome back to Florida Matters Live and Local. I'm Matthew Petty. This Sunday is Father's Day, and many across the country will be celebrating those close to them. This Sunday is Father's Day, and many across the country will be celebrating those close to them, but for some, Father's Day can be daunting and turn a day of celebration into one of profound absence. So whether you are remembering a father who's passed, grieving a child, or navigating complex relationship, or caring for a sick parent, holidays can amplify those emotions. We want to hear how you handle loss during the holidays. How do you honor a loved one's memory when everyone else is celebrating? If you're a father, do you find it difficult to talk openly about your grief? Shoot us an email, FloridaMatters@WUSF.org. We're here to talk about Father's Day and navigating holiday grief, and a new nationwide resource is Jason Cooper. He's the National Spiritual Services Lead for Vitas Healthcare. Thank you so much for being with us, Jason.
It's great to be here, Matthew. Thank you.
So tell us about your role at Vitas and what you do.
So I'm the National Spiritual Lead, which means that I get to support over 300 chaplains and bereavement services managers nationwide who are really on the front lines of caring for over 23,000 patients who have a prognosis of 6 months or less to live. My work really focuses on the emotional and the spiritual side of serious illness and grief, kind of the human side that can be overlooked in a healthcare setting.
Mm-hmm. And so when we think about a holiday like Father's Day, are you working with children of a father who may have one of those terminal diagnoses?
Well, I think we work with anybody, to be honest with you, because when Vitas provides this work for bereavement care and grief support, we're looking to provide support for anybody that might be finding themselves in a difficult season, especially around the holidays. Because Father's Day, like you mentioned, it can be a very beautiful time for many families, and it can be incredibly painful for others. And the funny thing is that both realities can exist at the same time. And so one of the things that we try to normalize in hospice and ultimately in bereavement care is that grief doesn't follow a calendar, but holidays often shine a spotlight on that loss and helping anybody, whether it's the adult children of a father who has passed or even a father who's navigating his own sense of loss during this season of the year.
We often think of grief after a death, right, Jason? But when you talk about somebody who maybe doesn't have long to live, or somebody who is still around but may be suffering from some other kind of ailment that means they're not really themselves, what does it mean to grieve someone who is still alive but is in that situation, like a parent with declining health?
Man, that's a great question. We talk about something called anticipatory grief, and that is looking ahead, knowing the reality has come, knowing that your loved one has been given a terminal diagnosis. And oftentimes, like I said, when they come on hospice, it's 6 months or less to live. And in that moment, there are a number of emotions that someone can go through. And like I said, one of them is anticipatory grief. And that often means I know what's coming. I'm losing someone. I'm already grieving the loss of the reality of that person. I'm grieving the future memories. I'm grieving the relationships, the loss of those relationships. I'm grieving the opportunities just to talk to my loved one that I'm not going to have. And especially, around the holidays, it could be grieving the fact that, a daughter may not have her dad who walks her down the aisle, or a mother who gets to dance with her son at a wedding. And so I think it's one of those things that looking ahead, knowing that loss is coming, it's already your body and your emotions and your mind is already dealing with grief because you know what's coming ahead.
We're talking about Father's Day and grief with Jason Cooper from Vitas Healthcare. How do you handle loss when the world around you is celebrating? Shoot us an email, let us know. We're at FloridaMatters@WUSF.org. So thinking about men and how men kind of process feelings, Jason, society often teaches men that they maybe should kind of keep that stuff buttoned down. So can grief be unique in some ways for men?
It's a great question there, because one of the greatest risks in grief is isolation. And we live in a culture where there have been men from a generation that were taught that you need to stifle your emotions, that emotions equal weakness, that the only emotions that really are strength are those aggressive emotions. So for a man to have been taught, hey, you're not allowed to cry, you're not allowed to mourn the loss of something, is an incredibly unhealthy thing. Grief that is ignored is grief that's not going away. It is just going to come out in a different, most likely an unhealthy way in the future. And so I think that by acknowledging that men and women grieve differently, not wrongly, but different for each one of them. And that we also recognize that grief is unique and very personal for each person that navigates it. So there is no particular blueprint for what grief should look like. We tell people all the time that you are grieving perfectly for you and the way you navigate that sense of loss. But yes, men do have a different set of needs, just like women do when it comes to grieving. And I think it's important for us to really normalize that and to say it's okay to grieve and it's okay to have those emotions.
Yeah, and just sort of thinking about the uniqueness of grief, I mean, the timeline too, it's not necessarily going to be tidy, right? It can kind of come and go and return unexpectedly. I wanted to ask, though, Vitas is launching a free Father's Day grief helpline on Sunday, June 21st. So tell us about the service and why June 21st to launch this.
Well, you know what? We wanted to make sure that not only if you had a family member on our service in hospice, but we also wanted to make sure that anyone who had a grief or a bereavement need didn't suffer in silence. They didn't sit back and say, well, I'll just put my head down and just press on. We wanted to say, hey, we're going to provide a hotline, if you will, a helpline that is going to connect you to a bereavement specialist at any point during the day on Sunday, June the 21st. It's going to be held from 8 a.m. in the morning on the eastern side of the country all the way to 11 o'clock at night Eastern time as well. That's going to give California, which we have programs out there, it's going to give the entire country at least 12 hours where they can actually pick up the phone and call someone and talk to them about the grief that they may be experiencing that this holiday may bring up.
So this is a free service for Sunday?
Completely free. And again, we'll have people manning this helpline all during the course of the day. And again, these are bereavement specialists. The goal is to simply remind people that are grieving that they're not alone and that support is available during what can be an especially difficult holiday.
In the last 30 seconds or so we have left here, Jason, what's the main thing you want grieving listeners to take away today?
I think the biggest thing is to remind those who are grieving and maybe those who have yet to experience a level of grief that may rise to that need of, I need to talk to someone, is this. Connection is one of the most healing things that we can offer to someone who is grieving. Sometimes that connection simply means sitting with someone, listening to their stories, not trying to fix it, but just simply allowing it, witnessing the grief that they're experiencing. And sometimes just that moment of connection is one of the most powerful things that we can offer people.
We've been talking about navigating holiday loss with Jason Cooper, National Spiritual Services Lead for Vitas Healthcare. Jason, thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And the free confidential Vitas Father's Day Grief Helpline will be open nationwide on Sunday, June 21st. Well, coming up next, World Sickle Cell Day is around the corner. Hear about the challenges facing people with this lifelong diagnosis, young people in particular, and hear about advances in treatment for sickle cell. That's when Florida Matters Live and Local continues. Stay with us.
On the next Fresh Air, an inside look at Donald Trump's campaign to acquire Greenland. While it's faded from the headlines, New Yorker staff writer Ben Taub says there are ongoing influence operations at Trump's direction to keep the possibility alive. In a new article, Taub reveals some key players in the effort and its impact on our European allies. Join us.
Great conversation on Fresh Air tonight at 7 on WUSF.
At WUSF, support comes from the people who listen, like you. Also, Seitenbacher, with a new web shop. Healthy muesli, cold-pressed oils, and vegetable broth mix delivered to your door from right here in Tampa Bay. Details at Seitenbacher.com. Seitenbacher. Seitenbacher.
This is WUSF, your spot for local arts.
Welcome back to Florida Matters Live and Local. I'm Matthew Petty. Well, Friday is World Sickle Cell Awareness Day. It's a serious disease that impacts around 100,000 black people and people of color in the United States. Sickle cell disease, also known as sickle cell anemia, affects red blood cells, and the flow of oxygen in the blood causes debilitating pain that can often land people in the hospital, and it can lead to other serious health problems. Maybe you or someone you know or live with has sickle cell. You can join the conversation by calling 813-755-6562 or emailing FloridaMatters@WUSF.org. And here to talk to us about this illness and World Sickle Cell Awareness Day is Dr. Ali Sanati-Merizi. He is the Assistant Professor of Pediatrics at USF and Medical Director for Pediatric Hematology and Oncology at Tampa General Hospital. Dr. Sanati-Merizi, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
So can you kind of explain sickle cell anemia a little more for listeners who may not be familiar with the disease?
Sure. Sickle cell disease or sickle cell anemia is an inherited disorder of hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is a protein in the body that's responsible for carrying oxygen. In these patients, when oxygen ultimately gets to where it needs to go, that free hemoglobin now changes shape in these patients. And it essentially twists on itself and becomes like a tight rope or like a braid. And once enough of those ropes or braids collect inside the red blood cell changes shape. And it changes into the classic crescent moon shaped sickled cell. And the problem with that is that red blood cells are supposed to be flexible, but these red blood cells become really rigid. And so they can't meander through the blood vessels the way that they're supposed to reach the places they need to go. And so the blood flow to places in the body become impacted. And those tissues don't get the blood that they need. And so that can lead to cumulative complications of different organs. So patients can experience frequent pain or complications to their kidneys or their brains or their lungs, and even develop severe anemia requiring blood transfusions.
I think sometimes we see headlines about it, right? Like occasionally you'll see a case where it's a young athlete who suddenly falls down on the field or something. Like, are those the most extreme examples of sickle cell anemia?
So sickle cell disease is any situation that will increase metabolism or stress the body out or create a need for more oxygen delivery will just accelerate the amount of sickling that goes on in the body and thus can create more symptoms. So a significant physical exertion could certainly do that. A significant illness could definitely do that. And so those are situations where the health of these patients can be impacted.
So if it causes severe pain, like where would a patient be feeling that?
So anywhere that the blood flow has been affected could manifest as pain. The pain sometimes is the manifestation of the cells that should be receiving that blood flow and are not. They're essentially dying off, and so in order to come to their rescue, the inflammatory process that comes to help those cells can lead to the pain symptoms that the patients are experiencing.
Okay. If you're just joining us on Florida Matters Live and Local, we're talking with Dr. Ali Sanati-Merizi. He's an assistant professor of pediatrics at USF, medical director for pediatric hematology and oncology at Tampa General Hospital. Talking about sickle cell anemia. World Sickle Cell Awareness Day is coming up on Friday. Now, maybe you know somebody who has sickle cell disease, or maybe if you've got questions about this, you can join the conversation by giving us a call. The number is 813-755-6562. You can also email FloridaMatters@WUSF.org. So back to your point about the disease being inherited, what does that mean for families? Once somebody has a diagnosis, should the rest of the family get tested? Is there something like that, or is it a little bit different?
Yeah, so in the state of Florida and in multiple states around the country, we screen for sickle cell disease at birth. So it's part of the newborn screening program, trying to identify these patients super early, because the sooner you can prevent complications, the better the patients do. And so it's we try to identify as many as we can on the newborn screening program in the state of Florida. And when we identify those patients, they should establish with a hematologist by 2 months of age and start the process in preventive care to make sure that they can optimize their health and wellness throughout their life. And then sickle cell disease tends to skip generations. So many people in their families may have family members who have sickle cell trait. And so understanding what that means and if in terms of family planning is really important. Considering undergoing carrier screening when you're trying to plan for having a family, understanding what your children's risks are, if they could be affected by sickle cell anemia, so that it doesn't come to you as a shock if and when you have a child with sickle cell disease is very important.
So what's it like for somebody with sickle cell? Like, what's their kind of day-to-day life like? Do they have to think carefully about activities they do? Is there, something they need to have with them at all times in terms of like medication? What does a day in the life of a sickle cell patient look like?
So a day in the life of a sickle cell patient is trying to stay as healthy as possible. So in children, we use early on some antibiotics to prevent infections. We make sure their vaccinations are given on time. There are certain additional vaccines that children with sickle cell disease have to receive in addition to normal childhood vaccinations. On a day-to-day basis, many patients may not have symptoms if they've been lucky enough not to have a lot of complications. Mm-hmm. But the complications of sickle cell disease can be cumulative. So once you've had complications earlier on in life, you may have lingering chronic ailments as a result of those earlier complications that you've had. And so every patient is a little bit different depending on how their disease has morphed throughout their life. So some patients may have no symptoms at all. Some patients may be having chronic pain where they're having to take pain medications every single day. And there are preventive medications. There's a medication known as hydroxyurea that helps to build resiliency of red blood cells so that they don't sickle as often. And so if you don't sickle as often, in theory, you should be having less complications.
Okay. Is that expensive?
Fortunately, hydroxyurea is covered pretty well by most insurance plans in the state. There are different formulations, and so there are brand name formulations and generic formulations that are available to all patients. So generally, we can temper the costs pretty well, and if for some reason there's not being covered, there are patient assistance programs that we can leverage to help with that cost.
We're talking about sickle cell anemia. World Sickle Cell Day is coming up on Friday. We're talking with Dr. Ali Sarasota-Manatee. He's an assistant professor of pediatrics at USF. If you want to weigh in on the conversation, maybe you know somebody with sickle cell. If you've got questions about it, the number is 813-755-6560. You can also email FloridaMatters@WUSF.org. That number again, 813-755-6562. So, I mean, is there any sign of a cure on the horizon for this in the research that's going on?
So that's a great question. Sickle cell treatment and cures are now available. There are basically 3 different cures available. One is that you can cure sickle cell disease with what's known as a bone marrow transplant. And so patients would undergo a little bit of chemotherapy up front and then receive a new set of bone marrow from a donor that can be a parent or an unrelated donor, and sometimes even a sibling. and we can put the donor's bone marrow into the patients, and the patients can be cured of their disease. The second two products are related to editing or adding a gene, and so these were FDA approved in December of 2023. They're available for children 12 and up. They're looking to expand that indication down to younger children as we speak. But one product works on editing a gene in the body that naturally suppresses fetal hemoglobin, the type of hemoglobin that all newborns are born with. So this reactivates the ability of these patients to make fetal hemoglobin again, and fetal hemoglobin doesn't sickle. And the second product is a gene addition therapy, where we can add a gene that codes for a hemoglobin that looks like a traditional hemoglobin A or adult hemoglobin and functions very similarly to regular adult hemoglobin. And so that new hemoglobin takes over and outcompetes the sickle hemoglobin, and the patients are essentially cured of the disease.
Wow. So it sounds like there's quite a lot of options out there, but are some of these kind of down the track some way? Are there things that are easily accessible for patients?
The gene therapy products are available in about 40 to 50 centers nationwide. So if you're interested, we can always connect you with centers that are doing them.
And is that expensive too?
The gene therapy products are quite expensive. One of them is about a little over $2 million. The other one is about $3 million. But obviously that much of that cost will be covered by insurance, but those are the list prices of the therapies. The bone marrow transplant process is a lot cheaper. It ranges about $250,000 to $500,000 for most patients. But those are available more readily. There are a lot more centers that can do bone marrow transplant for patients. The limiting factor is usually resources, space for those patients, because bone marrow transplant is also offered for certain cancer conditions,
right?
And so sometimes those take precedent to non-malignant patients. Yeah.
Just before we close out here, I mean, aside from genetics, like, do we know why some people's cells mutate and why others don't? Like, why is it that some have this kind of sickling tendency?
Yeah, so hemoglobin S has some protective effects in that the sickle hemoglobin is so red blood cells that produce sickled hemoglobin are less likely to be infected by malaria, and so that is one of the protective effects that is basically the evolutionary reason as to why sickle hemoglobin persists, because those patients who are from countries where malaria is endemic.
So it's like a protective function of the cell in some ways.
Exactly.
Wow.
So the cell has learned to adapt in those areas to protect itself against infection from malaria.
Yeah. What's sort of one takeaway you want people to think about? I mean, obviously Sickle Cell Awareness Day is coming up, so there's a need for more people to know about it. But in 30 seconds or so, what is one thing you would want people to take away from this conversation?
So sickle cell disease is out there. It affects about 150,000 people in the United States. So I would encourage people to learn about it. Many of your neighbors, your colleagues may have it. And so understanding what they're going through may help you realize why they may not be coming to school or coming to work that particular day. Know your family history. Support organizations that assist patients and families with this disease. And then I would say donate blood. So sickle cell disease patients often need transfusions, and the more they get transfusions, the trickier it is to transfuse them. So the more mixed the donor pool is, the better, the easier it is to find. And lastly, I'll plug an event that we're doing for Tampa General for the World Sickle Cell Day. We're having a sickle cell education day at DTH Health Park.
We're going to have to leave it there, I'm afraid. But thank you so much for your insights, Dr. Ali Sanadi. Ms. Marezi, Assistant Professor of Pediatrics at USF, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. Florida Matters Live and Local continues in a moment.
I'm Scott Tong. The album Mermaid Avenue, a collaboration between Billy Bragg and the band Wilco, came out nearly 3 decades ago. They will perform it in concert for the first time this month. Billy Bragg talks about the songs, which put Woody Guthrie's lyrics to music. Next time, Here and Now.
Join us this afternoon from 1 to 3 on WUSF 89.7.
If you want to know more about what's happening around you in 2026, subscribe to WUSF's Wake Up Call newsletter. It's your morning dose of the latest news and things to do. You can subscribe at WUSF.org.
For nearly a century, St. Petersburg College has been a guiding light for the communities of Tampa Bay, empowering generations to rise out of poverty and build more prosperous lives. More at SP College, Pathway to Better.
All work and no play? Take a break and listen to some jazz over at WUSFjazz.org. We've got performances, interviews, podcasts, playlists, and a whole lot more. WUSFjazz.org.
This is WUSF, your spot for local talk.
Welcome back to Florida Matters Live and Local. I'm Matthew Petty. While the Beatles may never have played in Tampa Bay, thousands of pieces of Beatles history now have a home here in Tampa Bay. Well, Penny Lane, the Beatles Museum, moved from its Dunedin home of 9 years last month, and their biggest space in downtown St. Pete is expected to open this summer. We want to hear from folks if you've maybe got a little bit of Beatlemania here in Tampa Bay. Maybe you've got fond memories of the Penny Lane Beatles Museum in Dunedin. Did you ever have a chance to see the Beatles perform? You can join the conversation by calling 813-755-6562. That's 813-755-6562 or emailing FloridaMatters@WUSF.org. With us in studio all the way from Penny Lane is Craig Barkner, Executive Director of the Penny Lane Beatles Museum. Craig, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Thanks for having us.
And we're also joined by Harlan Brown, Senior Docent at the museum. Harlan, thank you as well.
Oh, it's great to be here.
All right, so Harlan, let me start with you. Tell us a little bit about the museum. What's in the collection?
Oh, it's a very eclectic collection, and there's instruments. We have clothing that the Beatles wore, a baseball that was signed by Ringo, a lot of signed artifacts.
How did you get your hands on this stuff?
Well, it's not my collection.
Okay.
And our founder, Dr. Robert Entell, was the one who's been doing the collecting, and he's been collecting for over 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
He was studying in London in the early 80s, and that's when it all started.
Okay. Craig, what's your connection to the museum?
Well, as executive director, I'm the one that's helping get the building opened up and dealing with the city permits and getting the point-of-sale systems and museum software in place and the practical business side of the operations.
Why move to St. Pete?
It's a perfect population for it. We're the 13th museum in downtown St. Petersburg. There's actually no other city in the United States that has this density of museums for the space, and it's a very welcoming city for museums, for sure.
There's some challenges, though, right? I mean, you talked about the kind of permitting process and stuff, but has the museum community embraced this kind of move?
Absolutely. I'll give you an example. In being a new startup museum, 2 of the museums have offered to support us from a human resources standpoint to make sure that all our new employees get properly trained and started up, and to make sure that none of the startup mistakes get made that they might have made in the past. So they've been very, very generous about very specifically helping us with their time.
Yeah. Well, let me go back to the previous iteration of the museum in Dunedin. Were there some kind of missteps along the way? It was a bit of a learning process getting that thing started in Dunedin?
Oh, every day was a learning process. It was a very opportune place to be. But it was much smaller. And I think in the beginning it was an experiment to see if people would actually show up, and they have. And so now we are going to expand, and we'll have considerably more memorabilia to display.
So there's just more stuff that the founder has in his garage.
There's about 1,600 items in the collection right now, and the collecting continues.
Yeah, okay. Are other people involved in collecting now as well, or is it still mostly the founder? Like, how does that happen?
It's worldwide, I think. People are still collecting. You can find things online. And our collector, Robert, he just finds the things that strike him personally, and those are what we put in the museum.
Do people send you stuff as well?
Occasionally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any of it make it into the museum?
Rarely,
Yeah.
but sometimes they do. Yeah.
Yeah. If you're just joining us on Florida Matters Live and Local, we're talking with Harlan Brown, Senior Docent of the Penny Lane Beatles Museum. Also with us is Craig Bachner, Executive Director of the museum. It's going to open soon in downtown St. Pete after spending 9 years in Dunedin. What kind of Beatles memorabilia would you like to see preserved, or maybe you want to share your favourite Beatles memories or songs? Tell us why. Give us a call, 813-755-6562, or email FloridaMatters@WUSF.org. So are you kind of on schedule with the timeline of this reopening?
Yeah, more or less. In the grand scheme of things, we're on schedule. We're a few weeks behind where we'd like to be while we're waiting for our certificate of occupancy. We were hoping for a July 1st opening, and that'll be postponed a few weeks, but very close considering the year that it's taken to get us here.
Is the space designed for this purpose?
Yes, it was purposefully designed and built for this, only for this purpose, and you won't see anything else like it in probably all of Florida.
So
It was a national company that did this work.
So give me a sense of what you would see when you walk in the doors.
Before you even get in the doors, you're going to know you're at the Beatles Museum because of the artwork that's in the window, a lot of it mechanical, moving submarines and other activity that goes on. And when you walk in the door, it's all brightness. Everything is highlighted and brightly presented, just like 60s expectation you might have of what you'd see if you were back in the 60s.
Now, you a Beatles fan yourself?
I'm a Beatles fan. Now, I'm not as knowledgeable as most of the people involved in the museum are, but I grew up watching the Ed Sullivan Show as a kid, so I've been hooked from a long time.
Yeah. And what about you, Harlan?
Oh, I was a Beatles fan early on, really now they're affecting me more than they did when I was a kid. But I'm a musician because of them, and that's the best thing that's ever happened to me.
Tell us more about your music then.
Well, I've been playing in bands for 50 years and still play locally and internationally. They brought their light to the rest of the world, and people that come to the museum find that when they come in. They all have something to share because the Beatles touched people all over the world.
You play the drums, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting because sometimes people look at the Beatles or listen, they think the drumming may not be the most sophisticated element of the music, but was there something in that kind of spoke to you as a drummer?
No, it was just the drums at that point. I wanted to be like Ringo, but now spending more time analyzing the music, I find that he really brought a significant expertise to what he did.
Yeah, because they went through some different drummers, didn't they?
They did. They had 5.
Yeah. So, the Beatles broke up nearly 50 years ago. Craig, why do you think their music's endured? Why do you think it's kind of still has this hold on people?
Well, I think it's the message that they brought, which is about peace and love and hope, and a very positive message, and that's going to resonate for a long time. And, that generation is still with us, and they're passing that along and did pass it along to their children and grandchildren. And I think what's interesting, too, is that the internet has brought new life to the Beatles, that there are young kids we're finding from the 8 to 12-year-old age who are very knowledgeable about everything related to the Beatles, and that's a new phenomenon.
Yeah, and I suppose just thinking about the Beatles, the surviving Beatles now, they're still producing music, right? It's pretty incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that they're still producing and it's still relevant, and people still enjoy it. It's incredible.
Mm-hmm. When people come to the museum, what's something in the collection that surprises them the most?
The variety. They come in and they see things that they had when they were kids, and that sparks their memories, and it's wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a favorite item from the museum?
It's hard to say. We do have a drum set that was signed by Ringo, and that means a lot to me.
Oh, yeah. Have you ever had a go on it?
No. Do not touch.
Right. Museums preserve more than objects, right? They preserve memories. What kind of stories are visitors coming to the museum with, Greg?
Well, one of my favorite ones, and this has been repeated with a number of people, but there was a gentleman from England who came over a couple of years ago, and he saw a child's guitar in the museum, and he returned again this year, and he brought an image of himself as a 10-year-old with that guitar in his hands, stood next to it in the museum in the display case, and to me, that's what the museum is all about. It's those memories and the feelings, and I was at a particular concert, or I had this particular toy, or my parents had this, and that's what we're trying to promote, that fun and enjoyment.
Yeah. Did you see them perform on stage?
No, I never saw them live. Not even now. I haven't seen them live. I did see them on Ed Sullivan, so I was one of the 76 million who watched.
Was that kind of a watershed moment for you?
Oh, absolutely. What is this? They changed the way music was presented on TV.
Yeah. What were you listening to before then? Do you remember?
Frank Sinatra and big band music. That's what my dad listened to.
Okay. What about you, Greg?
I specifically the Four Tops and the Temptations.
Okay.
I grew up in Cleveland, and so we had that. It was a big part of our life.
And that, it sounds like that kind of changed your life in some ways too, so seeing them on this
Absolutely.
show.
Socially or culturally, the change with the long hair and everything else, it was just the beginning of a transition, and being an early teenager at that point, it was very influential.
Mm-hmm. So anything you want to leave our listeners with before the opening of this museum? Like what are we looking at in terms of an opening date?
I would say look at the third week in July. That's what we have our fingers crossed for now. And you can keep tabs on us by calling 818-BEATLES. We have an 800 number, 818-BEATLES.
You going to have an opening party?
We will have a grand opening celebration, and that'll be later this fall.
Mm-hmm. Well, we've been speaking with Craig Barkner, Executive Director of the Benny Lane Beatles Museum, and Senior Docent Harlan Brown. The museum opens in St. Pete later this summer after moving from Dunedin. That is our show for today. Next time on Florida Matters Live and Local, we're going to talk with some folks from across Tampa Bay's Black community about the legacy of Juneteenth and what freedom means to them. You can tune in Thursday at noon. Our executive producer is Grayson Doctor. Our producers are Amelie Horace and Quincy Walters. Our intern is Claire Macchiarola. Engineers are Jackson Hart, Blake Bass, and Gio Garvin. Jackson composed our theme song. Warren Buckholtz handled the video today. You can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and watch on WUSF's YouTube channel. I'm Matthew Petty. Thank you so much for listening and watching.